much for signing up, taking the time to join today. We have wonderful speakers for you in this new network, in this new community that we are really trying to build up because there's such a need in the world, in the workplace for products, services, places of work that include everybody. And that really means including people with disabilities who, let's say, are in the diversity and inclusion initiatives are often overlooked. So we're really trying to promote disability inclusion with this new network, Leaders for Accessibility. So I am Neve, the founder of the network. I also have my own technology business called Tigum, where we focus on analyzing your communication to see if it is accessible for people with disabilities, different literacy needs, different language needs. I'm from Dublin, I'm Irish, I am white, female with brown hair, and today I am wearing a purple shirt. I don't know what it is, long sleeve shirt. And our guest speakers today are the fabulous Barry Walsh, who is the founder of FocusOnDiversity.ie. And we have Ellie Doyle, who is the co-founder at TalentHub.ie. The reason that these two guests are so great to have here today when we're talking about hiring practices, the interview process, is that they come from different experiences. Barry is someone with a lived experience, or they both have lived experience. Barry more so throughout his whole life, whereas Ellie has an acquired disability now, which really puts her in the category of acquired people, and that's a fascinating story. So both of them are going to tell us more about themselves. So Barry, if you can describe yourself and what you do.
Sure. So thanks everybody, and thanks a million for everybody to Neve for inviting me, and thanks a million for everybody to signing up and coming today. So my name is Barry Walsh. I'm a white male with red hair, and I have glasses, and I have a kind of brown, striped brown and black jumper on today with a blurred background. So I want to focus on diversity.ie. So focusondiversity.ie. I'll just put it into, sorry, I'll just put it into the chat here. It's a website that promotes people, companies, and programs that are being proactive in the area of diversity and inclusion. I did this because I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dyspraxia at a very young age, kind of to give you a background of why I did it. And despite doing very well in college, I hit a roadblock that I just couldn't, when I left college, that I just could not do interviews. So over the next 11 years or so, I did approximately about 135 interviews. I had a number of good experiences during that, but the negative experiences definitely far outweighed the positive experience. Within that, then I had to go through the disability route to get employment. My first employment placement was with an organisation called AHEAD in Ireland. They're an NGO that place people with disabilities who have a degree into some of the biggest businesses in Ireland. So my first placement was with publicjobs.ie that runs the civil service hiring in Ireland. And my second placement was with Bank of Ireland's Think Business. Think Business has everything you need to start one or grow a business in Ireland. It also does a lot of content, and I started looking at content around diversity and inclusion. I became a bit of a specialist in this area. I worked with them for 9 months, and then in 2016, and then at the end of the placement, they said, could you provide us with one piece of content per month, which I've been doing ever since. So I actually left Dell exactly 4 years ago to the day that I left Dell, and then that was at the start of 2020. So that was just as the pandemic was about to hit. So it wasn't a fantastic time to go out job hunting anywhere. So then I was sitting at home, and I having joined Dell Technologies to help roll out the neurodiversity awareness training, I then became more aware of the programs they were doing, the different organizations like CWIT, for example, and the different programs that the larger organizations in Ireland are doing. And then I had all this experience from interviewing founders in Think Business through diversity and inclusion routes. And I kind of said, could I put together a website that I could promote what Irish companies are doing, what people are doing, and then I could also write myself and get people to write for me. So that's when I created FocusOnDiversity.ie. So FocusOnDiversity.ie was launched in March of 2021. We're nearly coming up to the 3rd anniversary. It's now kind of taken on a life of its own. I now have nearly 140 articles on it. It's got about 24,000 views. I've been invited to events like One Young World in Belfast, Legal Island. There's several different events, smaller events. And now I'm beginning to offer out trainings and programs around diversity and inclusion, such as neurodiversity awareness trainings, or trainings for diversity and inclusion in education. So that's kind of me. So I'm here today to kind of promote dyslexia and dyspraxia and neurodiversity from lived experiences, Niamh was saying. And then I can kind of give some guidance around practical tips for improving the overall interview experience, having had that much experience having interviews.
Well, now, Ellie, follow that. There's you've touched on loads and loads of things in there, Barry, about your lived experience, but also how you've used that to create something great now, focused on diversity. So we'll come back and like unpick some of those, things that you've mentioned in there, which I think people would be interested to know. So Ellie, over to you.
Thanks, Niamh, and thank you, Barry. Yeah, hard act to follow. So hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Doyle. I'm one of the founders and directors at Talent Hub. So from a professional, I'm here from both a professional and a personal point of view. So just a few professional creds. I have, God, shown my age now, 2 decades of experience building teams, mostly in high growth sectors like technology, data science, digital marketing, etc. So workforce planning, helping companies launch in new markets. And Barry mentioned CWIT. I also participate in a lot of D&I groups. I'm hugely passionate about the whole like gender gap and gender balance. I run my own female leaders group called Leaders Hub. So from a professional point of view, I'd like to think I would have a lot of experience. I'd always have my finger on the pulse of new changes to legislation. I have to as part of my job. So that was fine. But about 20 months ago, I had a brain aneurysm. And within a couple of hours, I'd had a stroke. And within another couple of hours, I was in a coma. So I don't know how year 2022 was. Mine wasn't very good. So I've lost track with the amount of hospitals I've spent time in. So basically, I am now finding that this whole world, I'm one of the lucky ones, apart from the fact that I'm alive, Niamh, which obviously is the main thing, and my kids still have a mom. I have my own business. I have an amazing business partner and teams, and my clients, my candidates, everyone's been so good to me, and I can do my job. The outcome is the same, nobody, it doesn't really matter as long as I deliver on what I commit to. But I have to say, this whole experience has taught me I would not like to be out there hiring. I always say, I don't know if I'd get through the interview, because even talking to you guys, I don't mind saying I have little post-it notes here on my laptop because my short-term memory has been badly affected. Nothing wrong with my long-term memory, as my husband will tell you, because I can still remember when he didn't pay the car insurance 10 years ago. But short-term memory, not so good. So I can do my job, but I just need accommodations. And I am so grateful to be, I have an attitude of gratitude. I'm so grateful to be alive, and that I'm in a role that pretty much lends itself to, work from home or anything. But as I say, I don't think I'd like to go into the big bad world And I'm really seeing firsthand how difficult it is for people who have to go through an interview process, often have to undertake an assessment, and then have to go through probation. And these people, I've met some amazing people on my journey, but the laws need to change, and then that's what we're going to come to now. So hopefully, if we can do something to oil the wheels of that, we'll all be happier.
Yeah. First, can I just, give a massive kind of boulabus round of applause and, to you, Ellie, for going through what you've gone through and just getting back on the horse, going back to work. And then being able to, going back to work, a lot of people could have just said, that's it, I'm staying at home now. Look at, woe is me. You're absolutely not doing that. And then you're here now to share your experience. How can you help with your experience in recruitment, but also your experience now as somebody with an acquired disability, acquired brain injury, to be able to educate and support everyone. So I just think everybody should give kind of a massive and raise and think to Ellie, you all have a choice about how you deal with things, same as you, Barry. You have a choice of how you deal with things, and you're turning what you experience into something positive can only be kind of celebrated. And that's why I think that you're both super guests to have today to talk to our attendees. And one question I want to put out to the attendees first is, I know that a lot of you are working in DEI, employee experience, people officers, HR. And I just want to ask, do you have a neurodiverse, neurodivergent employees? And so just even to think about that, are you aware of neurodivergent people in your company? And just on that, as I use the word neurodivergent, there's a lot of terminology around this, and maybe it can be confusing, maybe it can be the first time that you've heard of it. So we're really looking at, one thing that is important for all of us to know, and a lot of you guys do, is that we all operate on a different kind of cognitive spectrum. We all see the world and understand the world in different ways, but yeah, Barry, if you could just explain some of the terminology for us around things like the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergent, and some of the terminology there.
Yeah, so a person is neurodiverse. A group of people are neurodivergent. Sorry, no, I got that wrong. A person is neurodivergent. A group of people are neurodiverse, and people who don't have any type of neurodivergent are known as neurotypical. So that's why there's quite a lot of discrimination. I've had it once or twice that I always call it the other N word, not the N word, the other N word, for when people call it, the normal people. And I've had that in interview settings of the normal people versus the neurodivergent people. And it's so kind of demeaning. So it takes a long time to get your head around the language, and it's okay to get the language wrong a couple of times if you want, but it's try to stay away from the norm or normal, or kind of the average is the other one as well. That's quite the average person, and you're kind of saying, oh, just because I have disabilities, I'm not average, am I? It's bordering insulting, that kind of way.
I would say being average, is, and who wants to be average? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's but yeah, it's good to know the terminology about that. And so just in terms of like what we're going to look at is, experiences with interview. The interview process, has it changed in many years? Maybe now with the pandemic, more interviews are probably held online, but in terms of the overall process from the beginning to the end, has there been much change? And Barry, you mentioned the number in my head is 135. Is that correct? How many interviews have you been on?
Yeah, 135. Well, approximately that. It was an early lockdown project that I set myself, that I had to guess the number of interviews that I did, and then I went back through my emails and kind of went, oh, I forgot about that, forgot about that one. Oh yeah, that one. Oh, I applied for that twice, right? And it actually came out at about 120-ish, and then I did about 15 more after that. So it's approximately somewhere around that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's, incredible again to keep going, because when we get anybody gets a knockback, it's hard. But what in that, is there one, two, or three things? What is it, or was it in the process that you think was a barrier to you moving to the next level and getting the job? What was it in the interview process?
In the interview process, and it's different. The other thing about neurodiversity, there's a term in autism that some people may have heard, as saying that once you've met one autistic person, you've only met one autistic person. You've not met every single autistic person ever. It's the same for all types of neurodiversity. So I don't want kind of people coming away from this saying, I listen to one dyslexic person and that dyslexic person speaks for every dyslexic person. I don't. This is kind of my experience. But first of all, it was CVs at the start. First of all, not having an experience, and then not being able to perform well in interviews meant that I was going for a lot of internships. And because I didn't have the experience, I didn't get the internships. And because I didn't get the internships, I couldn't move on to the next level of that. And then it's things like application forms, and then it's the actual interview process itself. So going in and trying to explain what you have done in previous roles, or what you have, I always kind of say we when I mean to say I, all that kind of stuff. And then it was, I made more than my fair share of mistakes. But it was also, there was a few kind of outliers, if you like, that it was, there was one company who hadn't updated their website to their new office. So I went to the old office for the appointment, and suddenly they said, no, we moved a couple of months ago. There was another company that the doorman thought it would be hilarious if he told me that the company had moved. And by the time I got to the door, he said, oh, they're only about 10 minutes away. And by the time I got to the door of the lobby, he said, oh, no, they're just here. I'm just having a laugh with you, as I was going into the office. There was one example that I was saying to Eddie earlier, that I was down to the final two and I was pretty confident and that I would get it, and I just didn't get the job for whatever reason. And I was pretty disappointed. And about 6 months later, I actually found that I was working in another company with the guy's brother-in-law. And I was just like, listen, I never got any feedback on it. Would you mind if next time you're talking to him? And as it happened, he actually had a bit of drink on him. And the guy asked him, and he said that, oh yeah, I rang somebody who was in college with him, and they said that, oh, he's dyslexic, he'll spend half the time correcting the stuff that he gives you. And that was the job. Now, it's pure hearsay. Nothing was written down, with the kind of legalities of it. So it's those kind of experiences that when people are saying now, oh, it's much better for people in the with neurodiversity in the workplace, there's still that old stereotypes there that you have to break those barriers down. And it's usually until the term is somebody who is impacted by neurodiversity. So that could be you're diagnosed yourself, you acquire a type of neurodiversity, or your son, your daughter, your brother or sister, somebody close to you is diagnosed with some type of neurodiversity, and suddenly they're thrown into this area and they're kind of motivated to do something about it. And that's when you start to see neurodivergent hiring programs and different programs from colleges and all that type of information.
Wow, there's again very so much in there. And one thing that is, I think, really important, a lot of companies may focus on the onboarding experience or the integrating of an employee once they get past that process. And it's good to see in the chat there that some companies do have internal groups and support for that. But some of your experiences even relate to the very start of the process. And that's probably where we don't really focus a lot. And you know, there's stereotypes there as well, and we need to challenge, but even just those, where is the office? You know, and that joke that somebody's telling you is that if that doesn't land with it, you can't joke with people who are probably anxious for a certain thing. And another thing about the internships and looking at people that, you know, it's always that the chicken and egg story, and you probably come across this mostly, Ellie, in recruitment. How do you hire for people that may not have the experience? And as a past recruiter, I know that what you have to look for sometimes is between the lines, you know, that you're looking at the individual as well, you know. So with your experience now, do you think that you look at a person's CV, their LinkedIn profile, something about, you know, let's say you came across Barry and he's had no experience, but he has developed his own website and he's published 150 articles, you know, that can show you something about somebody, you know, has a major outlook on how you analyze, you know, CVs or applicants a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's something I do educating my clients, employers on. If you look at, I think it was the top 20. There's a thing that Bain and Co. or one of the big firms bring out every year about the top 20 skills in demand, and not one is a functional skill, which is great because so it's things like complex problem solving. Somebody mentioned in the chat there about Barry having tenacity, you know, ambition, ability to deal with ambiguity, which I know can be an issue for some people, but not so much for others. But I know complex problem solving seems to top the polls. But my point is, technology has given us technology has automated a lot of the functional skills. So what we're looking at now is almost a mindset, an attitude. You know, you hear a lot of people saying hire for attitude, and I always remember a very, very well-known CEO saying to me, Ellie, I think he said, get me the lump of coal and I'll make you a diamond, or he had a phrase like that. He's like, get me someone who's, and he had this gentleman had 5 things every candidate has to have, and not one would you see on their CV. You had to get to know them, which was analytical, can deal with ambiguity, take the ball and run with it, attitude. So anyway, my point is, works well with others, collaborative skills. They're things that it can be, although that opens up the market. So it's not a case of, you know, do you have this business degree from this university? The world has, it's a mixed blessing really, Niamh, because the world has become so much more receptive to people from all walks of life filling a role. But it's how do you get that across in a world where we are low touch, high tech? So if Barry or me, if I can't get in front of somebody, I'd like to think if I got in front of somebody, I could demonstrate that I'm quite capable. But how do I get in front of them? But obviously that's our job to try and help that. But so it is, the whole application process has changed. And do you know, there's I went to a really interesting talk about the Scandinavians do this. I mean, the Scandinavians are amazing at pretty much everything, and Denmark and Finland are the happiest countries in the world. There's a great book I'd recommend to anyone called Happy as a Dane, and I went to see the author. I think her name was Marlene, and she was talking about how they have the most amazing D&I policies in all businesses, and it's kind of the things that we hear and the rest of Europe, things that are the nice to haves, they are must haves. So like even down to, for anyone interested in sustainability, I think 78% of new jobs created in Denmark are in the sustainable industry, sustainability. So they're creating economic prosperity as well as doing some good for the planet. And whilst that's not related to neurodiversity, but my point is there's a lot that can be done, but unfortunately it does need legislation to enforce it. So what's coming in next year, and Barry, I think you might know a bit more than myself, and this is what do they call it, Barry? GDPR for equal rights. Do you want to tell the audience about that?
Yeah, so there's actually Neve might know more than the two of us together, but
it probably does.
Yeah, but yeah, you can explain, Neve, what you're talking about.
Well, I think you're talking about the EU Accessibility Act, and
Yeah,
that comes into force. So that's coming into force on June 2025, and so that is going to mean a lot of things for your organization, and you know, a lot of the touch points across your organization, and that really starts with even your digital storefront, your websites, you know, into equal hiring practices. And one thing, you know, with my company, what we look at is the language and communication. So under the Act, all of the touch points, let's say all of the employee and the customer touch points as well, so outward facing, they need to have two things, and they need to be accessible from a navigation point of view, which means that somebody with vision impairment can get through to book a service, buy a product, but also it needs to be understandable. And that's a very hard thing to measure. And that's what we try to measure, is the level of the language that you're using in order for you to be able to get feedback and say, should I use this word? And should I use this word in my job application, you know, as well? So with the EU, it's EAA, the EU Accessibility Act, it is, you know, it's coming into force, and everyone needs to make sure that things are understandable. So even if we just take that back to something like the job description, and we've mentioned that the getting into the room to be able to show who you are as a person can be very difficult for somebody because of the application, because of the job description. And if you look at even the word tenacity, you know, my background's in English language, I can tell you that the word tenacity is a very high level English word. Other words we've mentioned is ambiguity. That's a very high high level English word. If you're looking for people, and you know, you want to make your hiring process more inclusive as well for people with different literacy, cognitive needs, then there's a need to look at the language and the terminology that you put in your application form, that you put in your job description. Because you always have to think, is there another word I can use for this? And if there is a lower level word, and you might not know that, I'll share the link in a moment to how you can check. How you can. I'm frozen. Sorry, there's a bit of noise behind me. I'll send you a link in a moment. Oh yeah, on the EIA. I'll just mention that there's, I think you mentioned, Ellie, as well, something about the BAME, the trust. Any links, tips that we mention in this, we're going to put all together and send out in email afterwards. Even the Happy as a Dane book, I've noted.
Well, Neve, can I just mention though, I'm of a vintage, right? That I remember when people used to say, you know, Ellie, don't send me a girl who's going to you know, be pregnant, and that's not that long ago, Neve, right? So when I was in London, and I'm back 16 years, I remember when the British government brought in, it was a guideline, not a law, but we were told, and it definitely worked. And this was when sort of gender balance was really taking off in STEM, so in STEM areas. And it was things like words like dynamic. Instantly, it's proven that women will see certain language, you know, how a job spec is written, a job ad is written, and they won't apply because they associate certain words. But anyway, I don't want to take us down the gender rabbit hole, but what I mean is exactly the same principles will apply to the neurodiversity and the rebalancing. And can I just say, as someone who's doing this as long as I am, it is so, I have seen so many examples of where having an echo chamber of everyone the same, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You don't get diversity of thought, and you don't get people bringing new ideas to the table or questioning why is it done like that. If everybody, a lot of clients actually that I work with specifically say, don't take from my competitors, because they want that fresh pair of eyes or that fresh idea. So diversity of thought, I think, is a neurodiversity. It's having somebody on the team that, you know, that isn't afraid to go, why don't we do it like this? Or has anyone thought about that? And the as I say, what's that phrase? Knowledge. Knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So there does have to be a bit of common sense here. Like, I wouldn't apply for a job where I have to drive, because at the moment I'm not driving. But you know, if somebody is going to reject me for a job, I wouldn't mind if they say, you know what, you'd need to be able to hop in the car or whatever. That would be fine. It's just about making sure that employers are compliant. That's the biggest thing. They have to be able to, there's things you can do and can't do, and all those acts, there's loads of, it's actually not that hard. I think it's very lazy for an employer not to be compliant, because the information's out there, you know.
And just
Yeah,
on that, this problem isn't going away. So
No.
currently the unemployment rate, with latest statistics, the unemployment rate or underemployment rate for people with neurodiversity is about 65 to 85%. It's about 65 for people with dyslexia. It's about 85 for autistic people. So there currently then of the people in employment, of autistic people in employment, 75% have not diagnosed or not disclosed their diagnosis to their boss, but 75% of employers don't believe that they are employing somebody who is autistic. So I've got news for everybody on this webinar. If you're employing over 14 people, you have somebody who is neurodivergent on your staff. You just don't know it because they're not disclosing. And then it's not going away. Secondly, because currently there are 18,000 students registered with some type of disability in the Irish third level education. So, and about 65% of those are people with some form of neurodiversity. So you can see there that that problem is it could be coming further down the line then. So if people are leaving college, going into the workforce, and the unemployment rates remain that high for people with neurodiversity, the problem is only going to get worse, not going to get better.
And Barry, isn't it right? I think you and I talked about this. There's actually much better retention with any employee with a disability or you know, that identifies as neurodivergent. It is actually more loyal, because it's actually more hassle for them. The challenges that we just spoke about to start again. So it's better from a HR director's point of view to say, well, let's look after these people, let's accommodate them. And accommodating used to be a dirty word. It can't be a dirty word anymore. It's just fairness and equity.
Absolutely.
I'll just go to some of the things in the chat. In terms of the UK and the European Accessibility Act, the Act, you don't have to be a European, I know you're not in the EU anymore, you don't have to be an EU company in order to be under this law. If your customer is anywhere in the EU, then you know, you still fall under the same act. But the EU then has, the UK also is under the Equality Rights Act, and also under the UN Convention of Equal Rights for People with Disabilities. So the new one coming in June 2025, there, you know, you can have a pass or a fail with that in terms of like your digital footprint and things like that. But there are a lot of these Equal Rights Acts that your company is already under. What there isn't maybe is, you know, like Barry mentioned, you have employees with disabilities, you have customers with disabilities, you just may not know it. And the thing is that people with disabilities might be too afraid to tell you, because like Ellie mentioned, accommodations could be a dirty word, or if you say that you have dyslexia, they might think that you're going to take twice as long to do your work, so you're going to be less productive. And this is actually counterintuitive, this is stereotyping, and this is not, you know, true. So employees don't want to disclose it, and because they don't disclose it, then if there is something that you're not providing for them, they're not going to exercise their rights, and they're not going to sue you or anything like that, because they don't want to lose their job. So what more of these acts is doing is helping people with disabilities, saying, no, you do have rights. You do have rights, and you can speak out, because here now is the legislation that you can go to your employer with, or if you're a customer, you know, then it's really about giving them the ability to support themselves and raise their voices. And, you know, we as allies as well need to be able to support people and raise their voice. And
Niamh, if you and I both know Aoife, who runs the Happier at Work podcast, I think she might be with us today. And I was a group of us were on a really interesting webinar on her podcast last week about how many women women specifically, I suppose, are unaware of their you know, they're getting diagnosed later in life, and then it's a whole new world. And there was a great phrase somebody used, which is a new pair of glasses. And it's that kind of, oh, now my life makes sense. I didn't know I had ADHD. I didn't know I was dyspraxic. I didn't know I was dyslexic. So you know, there's I think that's why I'm obviously very passionate about work being outcome driven. It's like, if you can do it, stop having these silly rules around that are necessary for certain people. If you're a pilot, if you're a nurse, if you're, you know, whatever, of course, certain things, you know, have to be you know, enforced. But there's an awful lot of jobs that could be done so much with the employer being so much more accommodating, to use that word again, and aren't. And maybe this legislation will enforce that.
Yeah, and I think that coming to the accommodations, and I think that we don't have to wait on legislation to tell us to be inclusive.
No.
You know, and a lot of people are asking there in the chat, and we'll come to this next. We want it to be actionable tips, tactics that you can use at no cost to make your hiring, just before they get in the door, to make that inclusive and to be able to find more neurodiverse talent. You know, things that are not going to cost the world, but just to know as well that if you make these provisions and these accommodations, you're making the experience better for everyone, not just neurodiverse people. And so if we, you know, design for people at the margins, we bring those needs into the center, then everyone's going to have a better experience, and they're going to want to work for your company. And I just even saw somebody on LinkedIn the other day, a wheelchair user, said, I had an interview, it's my final round, I love this company, I want to work for them. I got there, I told them in the email that I needed accommodations for the wheelchair. When I got there, nobody had taken any notice of that, and I had to go through the trade entry and exit at the back of the building. Now I don't know if I want to work for that company. You know, so first of all, if you're going to ask for accommodations, be respectful of them and put them in place. And there's other things that you can do. Maybe it's not maybe wheelchair, but for neurodiversity. So Barry, any tips that you can give to people from the application, from the start?
The beginning, sure. So what I would say is, first of all, look at your job descriptions. So that's the very first point of call that you need to be looking at, because if a person, so I'm the same as Eddie, I don't drive, but you wouldn't believe the amount of job descriptions that must have own car. How many jobs do you know that actually you must have own car if it's an office-based job? Okay, fair enough, salespeople, or if you need to go on long distances often. But an awful lot of jobs could be done in, if you have to go down to Cork, why can't you take the train to Cork? Or if you have to go somewhere within Dublin, why can't you take a taxi to somewhere within Dublin? So, but just by saying stuff like that, and it's the language used in it is really important. Then the big one, and one that I had regular discussions, let's say,
rants, Barry,
rants, I think, yeah, possibly rants, with in public jobs when I was there, and I was friends with Niall Levy, and when I was in there, and still am. So he's the head of marketing for publicjobs.ie, and I used to say to him, if you are using psychometric testing as part of your interview process, you are not getting the best people for the job. You are getting less people that can do maths for the job, but that's not the same thing. I'm dyslexic, and as well as being dyslexic. I've been terrible at maths my entire life. I'm not going to put my hand up just for another maths exam. So you've just lost me at the first hurdle, if you like. Then do things like consider this sensory environment. So the light, the heat, the noise, for example. I did one interview where they were digging literally right outside like Irish Water is doing to me right now, digging up the road right outside my the interview room that was in. And it was really difficult even just to hear what the people were saying and try to reframe your concentrating. Possibly send the interview questions in advance. Do you have to have gotcha questions in there? Do you have to have those ridiculous questions that we all hate, that like how many wire manhole covers round, all of that type of information.
Google
then
questions.
Yeah, exactly. Those type. Then stick to exactly what is needed for the job. So do you have to do a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, for example? Can you be flexible of hours? Make sure there's no surprises during the interview. So for one interview, I went in and they gave me a fractions test. Said, oh, we just do this to people just before interviews. And I nearly handed it back to them saying, you may as well just not do the interview, because I know that I've just failed this interview. There's no point in doing this interview. And then our post interview is actually really important. And so, sorry, I'm like Ellie, I have notes here beside me. Provide up-to-date information, provide directions in the email. Possibly have things like virtual tours or have photos of the building so that you know when you get there, okay, this is the right room or this is the right building. And then post interview is a bit of a rant of mine. I would say out of all the interviews that I've done, 50% get back to people with information. Most of them that say, okay, we'll give you a ring by Friday, and all day Friday I'm looking at my phone saying ring, please ring, and nothing ever comes. And by the Wednesday you're kind of saying, well, it's obvious I never got that job. Instead of them actually, I would say legislation is needed again for interviews, just to say, to get back to people and just say, unfortunately, you've not been selected for this job. And even if it's a one-liner, and then you get back to them in future, but the big one is provide feedback, because there's no point in just saying to somebody, you've been unsuccessful for this job. What can they do with that information? You've been unsuccessful for this job because we think that you could use more experience, and that you could possibly upskill in this area, for example. And that's the big one. And then ask for feedback on your process. Or other, sometimes what I've seen companies do is get their own employees to apply for jobs within the company as a kind of rogue agent, if you like, and see how well they do in the actual process, and then you can start to iron out. So this is what we go through in the neurodiversity awareness training that we've myself and Ellie kind of worked on together, that we can kind of provide that job descriptions tips, provide the interview tips, and provide the kind of resources afterwards that you can do. And it's not rocket science. None of that costs any money. The head did a research, and I think it's 90% of reasonable accommodations are cost absolutely nothing to the employer, and the other 10% is usually covered by grants. And then a company called Ability Focus, a big one for job descriptions, was that a company called Ability Focus did a investigation of over 500 Irish job descriptions, and 8% said that they provide reasonable accommodations at the interview process. Only 8%. So that even just, if there's one takeaway from today, an actionable takeaway, just put in the job descriptions that if you require reasonable accommodations, please let us know. Something like that. It's very easy, and it makes that stress level of the person who may need the reasonable accommodations be reduced, saying, oh, actually, they really want me, instead of other companies that couldn't be bothered even putting it on.
And if I can just mention, there is a lot of free tools out there. So Loom is a great one that companies are using to, you know, from like an insight into, you know, what is it like to work here. And these are like cookie cutter projects. Like, you make one video, you can send that out to every single candidate. All I would say is, with my recruiter head on, there is a rationale that sometimes getting the questions in advance is not always good, because people go on Glassdoor, they prepare the answers that they, instead of the think on your feet, is often, it can tell you a lot about someone. I often do throw the curveball questions in, and it's not to try and trip somebody up. It's, you get the best ideas from somebody when but there has to be a relevancy there. Like, that's not, you would do that for certain people where their job depends on agility of thought and speed of thought, and the like an actuary or something. It's not relevant to, like, maybe a marketing manager or something like that. So it's about putting your interview processes, it's about putting together processes that are not just relevant to the company. Don't have a one size fits all. It's relevant to that particular role, and then also factoring in if that candidate alerts you to the fact that they do need those accommodations in advance. But it's really not that complicated and an interview, it's a two-way street. I always say both parties have to get something out of it. So it's in everyone's interest to make it as beneficial as possible. The candidate mightn't get the job, they might get offered the job and they decide not to take it, but both parties should go away with a positive experience. And that's what we want to do. We want to create a positive experience.
And the one that, the one that I forgot as well is dress code. Do you have to wear a shirt and tie and a suit for men, or can you just, you know, have respectable kind of ironed worked clothes, if you like? Do you have to go in, because some people may not like the, particularly autistic people, may not like the actual feel of suits, or they may find
the feel of the fabric.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Or the top button kind of feels almost claustrophobic.
I think those days are gone, though, Barry. I'm not seeing much about.
You'd be surprised.
We always ask the question, but I think I don't know. I don't think those days. Thankfully, if one good thing comes out of the last few years, the world has certainly become more flexible in regards. Work from home and you know, accommodations around dress code and that type of thing.
I think again, there's such a wealth of knowledge in there, and lots of tips that are going to just summarize and touch on some of the points from the chat as well. You know, people are finding this really really interesting, really valuable. So some of the free things that you can implement from today, you know, is look at your job description, look at the language that you're using in it. Um, are you saying what the role actually needs? And
Yeah.
one thing, going back to how do we get the right people in the door? Like, if you're going to say must be a team player, but actually, do they really need to be? You know, so
Yeah.
somebody with autism might not be a team player. Is that really essential for the role?
Yeah.
And it might not be, depending on the role. So look at your job description, look at your application forms from a language point of view as well. Look at the words you're using in there. Things like, where is your residence? You know, is maybe more from banks. So where do you live? Where's your home?
Yeah.
You know, things like that. It's just an example of the language you can use, given the directions, making sure that you're up to date on, maybe in the email, maybe your Google address isn't up to date, but in the email, how can they get there?
Yeah.
Gone with Ellie, the software Ellie mentioned was Loom. Or you could just do a video call, not a video call, just record a video. You know, show a visual image, show the outside of the building. So Barry has lost out in interviews because he wasn't at the right building, or someone was joking with him. A visual image of the building. This is the street. This is how you get across it. Loom can be great to show, again, video, and you can share it to be able to show inside the office or the working environment. If
A
people
day in the life. A lot of people are using Loom for, here's a day in the life of company ABC.
Nice. And that
Yeah.
might be a good way of attracting people. It might also, there was a question about women. I think what everyone really needs to look at is that process from the beginning, and where could there be potential barriers? Are we using words like ninja? You know, you have to be we're looking for a marketing ninja.
Yeah.
You know, what
Banned.
the
I banned it
terminology
from all
you're
job
using.
descriptions, Neve.
Yeah.
I banned it years ago.
Banned it. Good woman, Ellie. Good woman. But you know, there's a lot of things like the feedback, and we don't realize, if somebody is a naturally maybe anxious person, has anxiety,
Yeah.
if you say you're going to get back to them and you don't, you've caused more anxiety. And I love that thing about the company asking for feedback. So if you're struggling to hire neurodiverse people, if you're struggling to hire women into senior roles, seek them out first of all in maybe communities, seek them out in LinkedIn, seek them out in meetups, and ask them why they didn't apply. You know, like, where are the barriers? So there's a lot of things in there, and for some people that maybe have said that they are neurodivergent and they don't know how to disclose this to their organization. You know, Barry is a wealth of information and knowledge here, and you know, has his own company and consultancy that I'm going to share. I have I have his LinkedIn here, so you can connect with Barry, you can connect with Ellie.
Put my website in, but if somebody wants to get on to me directly on LinkedIn, absolutely.
Yeah.
Copied the wrong one, but all of these links I'm gonna share out. I'm going to share as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can get in touch as well. So
yeah, I can get it here,
think-
Neve, if you like.
you have it there, and I'll share Ellie as well.
Yep.
I think what's important and what we can see from this is that there's more conversations to be had. People are looking for, people want to know, they want to know how to do better, you know. And then in the Leaders for Accessibility network as well, we are setting up a membership that anybody in your team can join. So it's a low monthly subscription, and what we'll have is something like this every week or every 2 weeks, that we have a strategy circle. It's a more private, more safe place, and we'd have people like Barry where we can ask questions about accommodations, ask Ellie about recruitment, you know, so that we can work together. And then you can probably put in intentions. You know, in the next month, I want to have the feedback forms ready for my employees. I want to find out more about that. And so we can work together then to, you know, upskill, strategize, and really kind of take action, bring in accessibility into your role, but then also sprinkle it across your organization as well. So yeah, I'm conscious of the time, and I know that people need to get back to work as well. But I think
Thanks for sharing our
everybody-
details, Niamh. And
I've put
sure,
your- I've put you in
anyone
the chat.
can reach out to us, and you know, if they want any follow-on materials or they want to ask a question, you know, like all recruiters, I pretty much live on LinkedIn, so I'll always respond. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm the same.
absolutely.
If somebody wants to promote what they're doing within diversity and inclusion, or they're just looking for information, extra trainings, anything like that, can be shared.
Yeah, and so we'll be opening up. I shared your details. I'll share them again in an email. And
Brilliant.
we're opening up the membership forms, and at the end of the month, February, the beginning of March, we will start with what I'm calling strategy circles, so we can look at the specific problems that people have. How do I disclose my accommodation? And we bring in expert specialists to be able to discuss that and give you the tools and strategies to be able to make your work life better, not experience burnout, and do better, you know, all around for employees, but also for the disability community as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And well done
Yeah.
to
No,
Vanessa.
yeah. Well done, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, so much. You know, it's been great. So everybody, yes, we will wrap it up there. But if you have any questions, you can contact myself, and you can contact Barry and Ellie as well. So everyone have a
Thank
great
you,
day, and
Niamh.
I'll see you.
I look
Thanks
forward
a
to the
million,
next
Niamh.
one. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.